in my opinion, and you don't have to share this at all, dissent is openly welcome. I'm not saying you have to share it or anything, but it is my view of what I know of the Gundam franchise, which, to say the least, is not much. It's like very little. But if I go and I talk about you know this and the way that I feel, towards Gundam Wing is that like its fandom is like stitched together and glued together by pure nostalgia because from my vantage point, there was a video. It was intended to be comedic, but it kind of finally shook me into realizing why like I didn't actually enjoy this experience that much, and this was it.
Peter Yui, isn't there something you're forgetting to say to Colonel Zex? I will thank him, but in my own way. I'll kill Zex. That's how I'll show my gratitude. That'd be fine.
And that's it right there. I mean, it feels like this show, kind of came out of an era where if you wanted to grab an audience's attention, you had to be over the top and exaggerated to the point of absurdity. And I feel that this is one of the reasons why, like, I actually feel that I tuned in for the 86 experience despite my distaste for Gundam Wing, which I feel like this is what I have to say about it. It doesn't hold up well. It's aged like milk, basically, in the current atmosphere. Especially compared to other mech enemies, and like I said, it feels like it comes out of an earlier era where in order to capture attention in a show, you had to be go so extreme that everyone else, and out extreme everyone else and go so over the top it would make modern audiences call you an edge lord. So I've realized why, this kind of thing is exactly why I usually really don't actually like mech anime. I associate Gundam Wing with an earlier era of extreme marketing and not in a good way. And you know, like maybe this is not the best Gundam or anything. I've heard people talk about how it can often explore, the problems with the military industrial complex and war as a horror and, put forward as a bad thing. But, for me, like it's like, for one thing, the show just doesn't come across as clearly in that stuff. It's almost like you have to reach in and beneath the narrative to actually pick up on those aspects because it's really not doing enough to emphasize it. And when I contrast it to something like 86, which I really do feel spoiled by, 86 didn't sugarcoat war at all. By contrast, it's filled with characters that recognize the horrors of war. They don't glorify it at all. They're horrified by it. They truly loathe it and are forced by circumstances, into combat that, they didn't choose for themselves, you know, at all. And, or they're like Lena, bloody Regina, who, you know, recognizes the unfair treatment of having, a supposedly inferior race fight your wars for you, and the fact that real humans are dying in this combat that's happening, and you know sees them as her equal, and is horrified by the ongoing reality. And you know that's the thing. I mean, 86 makes mech warfare feel too real, as is put forward by Mother's Basement. But I do feel this way. Like Gundam Wing basically held up like milk. It just it doesn't it it goes into the current era. very very broken, you know, because of it. It's just it's got too much edge basically to the point in which it really is actually rather off-putting, you know, for the show. And you know, I've heard some like really hardcore like Gundam fans are like, yeah, well, it really isn't, you know, the best of it. It really isn't the show that really should have been emphasized as far as Gundam. So I don't have enough experience to know that. But you know, going back, I watched this show like a couple of years ago, and I was kind of, well, I mean, when I was watching it, I found it, you know, to be somewhat enjoyable, but you know, the retrospective analysis aspect that I ended up with when I did the rewind to really chew on my thoughts about the show, it went downhill quickly. You know, like it's like this may be something that's kind of like fun to watch, but you know, when I rewind it in my head mentally, I can't help but realize everyone in this series is utterly insane. You know, Hero crash lands on the planet, you know, to be seen by Relina, who he almost immediately says that he will kill, and then there's supposed to be some kind of romantic, you know, plot between these two where they end up attracted to each other. But of course, this romance is never like really deeply explored in the show. You know, you only get them screaming at each other basically, and that's all that you get over the whole goddamn thing. So you get these you know, flavorings of romance or these hints towards it, but they never actually go anywhere. There's no actual payoff for any of it, you know, of the experience. Like, I mean, there's a couple, I guess, where she says, you know, she confronts him and basically says, "You're obviously not going to kill me because you haven't already." But you know, the show, you know, every time it teases you about the two of them. You know, it doesn't actually show them getting together, and so it bludgeons you over the head with the fact that these characters are romantically connected rather, and uses a strategy of tell don't show, and that's just not, you know, a good storytelling. And you know, 86 by contrast I feel does a very good job of, you know, showing rather than telling, you know, so much so that so much analysis is now sinking into the show, you know, to pick up on missed symbolism and, you know, aspects of it that we didn't pick up on our first run through it in order to actually see the things that were not told by exposition dumps and not hinted at, you know, in the whole thing. And you know, they were hinted at, but they weren't, you know, explicitly, you know, communicated in the dialogue. You know, you're trying to pick up on things that went in, and details that went into it that were not, you know, explicitly spelt out, you know, in the dialogue that happens. And so many people are starting to notice that, you know, there's a lot more that's there to 86 than just what's in the dialogue itself between the characters, which in of itself is S tier. You know, the dialogue is absolutely phenomenal on it, and I think that's one of the reasons why, like, I started to fall out of love with Gundam, you know, and started to view it as an overrated, you know, anime. Not Gundam broadly, but Gundam Wing. You know, I started to view it as an overrated anime that got way too much praise and attention during the era, and I feel that, you know, what made it popular in a lot of ways is that we just didn't have a lot to compare it to. We didn't have other options, you know, for that sort of thing. We didn't we just Gundam Wing was kind of vomited into a world in which the West, you know, United States was having, you know, difficulty even you know, gaining access to anime, you know, to watch. It was part of that era before like the internet, before it broadband internet was, you know, ubiquitous, and before, you know, we all had, you know, much more intense access to, you know, to content. And when it was put into that world, you know, a lot of very flawed content just kind of, you know, sails by as if it's golden, you know. which may have a lot to do with my enduring love for Rumbling Hearts slash Kimigano Zumuin, despite its you know fact that it's got dedicated haters at this point. I'm still a Kimi no Zu fan, but Kimi no Zu came at a time in which anime was relatively difficult to access and consume. It comes out of an era where we had so much less to compare it to than we do today. And I feel that a lot of the fandom and fanery that exist around Gundam Wing at this point exist primarily as a nostalgia factor, and coast off of that. But like I said, this show has basically aged like milk, not in a good way. People have retrospective analyses have been done that talk about how it kind of exposes the horrors of war, and it really shows you it rather than telling you it too. And could be used as a social commentary on the horrors of the military industrial complex and everything. But Gundam Wing in particular kind of falls into a trap, like I said, of being, potentially war critical media that actually, because it shows so much combat, ends up, and, has characters like that, ends up glorifying war rather than serving as an anti war narrative, you know? Whether or not this show was intended as social commentary on, armed combat, it doesn't matter. It ends up glorifying it, you know, at the end of the day. And, I feel like I feel like Gundam Wing just ends up having so much edge that it left me rolling my eyes, like this show is just too over the top.